had all the details for a particular module, like everything is, encapsulated within that module itself. The whole idea behind modular monolith is at any point of time, if you want to extract it as a separate service, you should be able to easily do it. The structure that we are showing it here, we can easily move this folder outside, right? Because it doesn't, as Sandeep mentioned, there was only one reference at a controller level. So if you change that, like you can easily move the module out. But in the example that you have explained, like that's not the case. Like we have a common repository across all the modules. So how will you extract it? So if you have to extract it, then you have to go into the repository layer, identify those classes, and then extract it. And when you have this common repository layer, it might have a reference to other modules as well. Like so, then this kind of I think whatever this is happening is like almost a monolith, right? It's not even modular. And what you do is like the business logic, that is the domain. You have a separate domain layer, but the other thing is not modular.
That if we say that the module itself is like can be extracted out into microservices, then what is the advantage of modular monolith? Why don't we go for a microservice altogether?
Yeah, I mean, even in my case, in the example that I gave you, right? Like, so there is, when you're not even sure whether it needs, whether it needs to be a separate service, right? Like when it has to be a separate service, like it, assume that, right? Okay, you have just one endpoint, and you have 10 different endpoints, and each of them performing a slightly different activity, and you create 10 containers for this and deploy this into the rest of it. And what happened to the infrastructure cost and the maintenance of it and the pipelines for each of this? Is that really necessary?
Okay.
So that was there could be many other factors as well, because in the example that I explained, so that was the factor for us. Like we know that like these two are not supposed to be together, but here it really also did not make sense to have all the resources and cost involved just for a single service, because we are also at least in terms of the concept of platform and sharing common logic across teams. So that was there. So we tried to stick that together so that if it becomes really bigger and then we reach a point where this needs to be dealt with separately, that is when like we'll extract it out. But until then, like we'll have it together. I'm just talking about 2 services, right? Like, but if this goes to 10 services, like, and this is going to expand. And we're just talking about one environment, right? Like you might have a development environment, you might have a QA, you might have a performance environment, you have a production environment. So this kind of gets multiplied. And if you calculate the cost, then it definitely goes really high, and it doesn't make sense. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Sri, you want to add something?
Yeah. See, one thing, right? Please get this very clear. At least this, I'm highly opinionated about this. Microservices architecture is not a silver bullet, right? Again, does your team or your client or your project really need microservice architecture? You have to think through it. Same applies to domain-driven design. But you can apply, the beauty of domain-driven design is you can apply parts of it, as Sandeep called out yesterday. If you don't embrace it entirely, say the strategic patterns or other things, but you can even embrace the smaller parts of it, right? The good parts of it, good parts of TDD. But every architecture, monolith, microservices, event-driven, pipes and filter, space-based, a lot layered, right? All of these are equal, meaning anything can be used. It is the problem domain that decides the architecture, the target architecture that it demands, and not the other way around. Just because that you are passionate about microservices, you cannot go and use microservices, right? Is that message clear with everyone? Satish, you want to add something?
This applies to everything, right? Like whatever concept that you're talking about, event-driven architecture, event sourcing, whatever you're talking about. It's not just about these fancy terms and using them, right? What we have to think is like, does it really make sense?
Yes, and most importantly, first thing is, right, when there are 2 levels I see. First step is awareness.
Talking about this topic, like one thing that quickly came to mind, I think it was Netflix or something. In a couple of months ago, there was a lot of news about Netflix moving away from microservices and back to monolith and all that, right? Like, so, people have to think through and see like whether it really makes sense, and where it makes sense, like go with the specific architecture, and if it doesn't make sense, even if it is old, like, it still makes sense.
Yeah. Sorry, I got interrupted. The first thing is awareness. Knowing something exists. and from there it goes to the next level, which is application, right? So from awareness, only when you're aware of something, you'll be able to apply it in a given context. So this session, or whatever we are doing today, gives you a lot of awareness and a bit of their application knowledge, right? Beyond that, you will learn more in your real life projects as you work with it, as you work with your team. It is not again a one man or a single person decision or a call, right? It's going to be a team effort, because you're talking about interaction between individuals, where you're interacting with the domain expert, your team. A lot of other factors are there, right? A lot of other players. There are also financial aspects of it, where you need to get that enough time and budget and approvals to have the collaboration and do something. If everything runs at a breakneck speed, and you go and say, I want to talk to my domain expert, can you please wait? Sometimes it doesn't really happen that way. So everything is applicable in a given context. Try to see what you need to do in a given context and then use it accordingly. Go ahead, Satish.
Thanks, Sri. So, any other questions or comments related to model or monolith before we proceed? Okay. Move back to slideshow. Good, I think we are good there. Yeah, the next topic that we have is event sourcing, right? Something that we have been talking. I think Sandeep covered a lot of it yesterday. And so one thing that I have, right, like, so what do you think? I mean, things like e-commerce websites, right? Like, let's say that Amazon or Flipkart, like, what do? Like, we have this whole journey of ordering a product, right? You search a product, you put it in a cart and order it. And do you think they store only the final state of it, where the order is placed? What do you think? Anyone?
The shipment happens afterwards.
Mm-hmm. No, but do they store, I mean, let's say shipment happen afterwards, but between searching for a product and placing the order, right? Do they store only the final state, that is order being placed?
No, as per yesterday's exercise that we did, we also store the items that were removed so that later on they can show us the history, like whatever we had searched, those items are on sale or whatever if we again want to buy those. That is one of the states. Yeah, and I think I personally think that they also store our search history also, because later on we do get notifications about what we had searched before. Maybe if there's a price drop or some new features have been added, something like that.
Yeah, you not only get information about what you search, right? You get recommendations related to what you search, and there is also another interesting feature that I see normally on Amazon, where you see when you're searching for something, like you also get a reference. Say people who searched for this item also search for few other items, and they give recommendations out of it. And how do you get all this information? Because like each intermediate state is being captured, so that is what exactly event sourcing is doing, right? It's not just capturing the final state of it. What happens here is like we capture each and every internet state, just like what we did yesterday, like even in the slide that we have, so that an item is being added to cart and what is being removed. And with this data, a lot can be done. I mean, things like auditing, and here that one that I talked about was like recommendations, right? Like so we can talk about we can bring about recommendations that are being come in. And what else? And also one of the main advantage that we have here is also we can replay the history, right? Like so when you have this kind of a state, like we can even go back to any state in any of your previous state, and you can also replay the history. There is also, so we talk a lot about event sourcing and its complexity, right? And there is another example, interesting case study that I studied is something related to payroll processing, right? Like this was an interesting case study I'll quickly share. So there was a payroll processing system, and they figured out that for a particular person, 4 hours was not captured in the payroll 3 months ago. Okay, so this was 3 months ago. This is not for the last month, right? Like this was for the 3 months ago. And now, so what they can do is like they can definitely pay him the additional pay for the 4 hours in the current month. But the thing is that it's not only about the pay. So this organization has a lot of other benefits based on the number of hours that you work and all that. Let's assume that okay, this person gets an additional bonus, like if he has worked for like 120 hours or something of that sort, not in a specific time range. And this 4 hours has, let's say this 4 hours has brought that below that, right? So he is actually eligible for that particular bonus, but because of this much, like he's not eligible. But how will you verify that and all that, right? So this is where like you can also replay the history. So this is an interesting thing that I read about, where we could recreate and replay the history from there. Like what we could do is like, we can just go back to that particular state and remove the bad event, that is like which missed that 4 hours, and then add the 4 hours and replay it. So this way, like we'll be able to even figure out like, okay, what was the current state. Yes, Sri?
Yeah, yesterday I think Sandeep also spoke about event sourcing a bit. I mean, he spoke about the snapshotting, and somebody had a question. Am I going to, what do you call it? Fetch everything and then recompute the state? That's when Sandeep explained about snapshotting. All of those things will come into picture in event sourcing. So he also spoke, remember he also spoke about accountants. Accountants don't use a pencil, they use a pen, something like that, right?
Yeah, we always talk about the technical part of it, right? Like, but when it's applied, when it's like, what are the areas when it is getting applied? So one that we saw was like how it is being used in the e-commerce, and this is another like payroll, like where, I mean, what kind of complexities that it could solve, without which you would have not achieved that.
So typical banking systems. So take it this way, no? Wherever you have a use case where you want to capture the updates that happen, you need an audit trail. Because once you update the data, it's going to overwrite the old data with the new one, right? So typically you will face an issue when somebody asks you for an audit trail. Financial transaction, tax calculations, and all of these things are candidates for event sourcing. Go ahead, Satish.
I mean, so one thing is definitely an audit trail, right? But it doesn't stop there. Like it gives you a historical state. Okay, let's say let's say you in your bank statement, right? Like you go to a particular statement, let's say 3 months ago statement, and if you see the March or like February statement, then it tells you like at that point of time what was your balance. So achieving this kind of historical state is also possible.
Yes, definitely. Any questions on this, folks, before we move forward? I mean, no questions? Or is it going over your head?
I mean, I know that these are like a bit complex topics, but naturally they're also trying to bring in like real life examples so that you can relate to it easily. But if anyone else has used this and if they have any other examples, like please feel free to share. Sure. Okay, so here again, right, like in this picture, like we're talking about what happens with the event sourcing, right? Even in terms of this picture where we talk about an item being added, how it goes to the database, and also the item added event is going to a message queue, so where we keep track of this event. So we also talked about this transaction outbox pattern, right? I think I'll quickly cover that. So okay. So what happens is that, like, let's say in the previous example that we saw, we are persisting the order. We are persisting the order state, and we are also sending a message about the event, right? And what happens? Let's say you do this parallel, and what happens? You send a message for the event, but what happens if the order doesn't get fulfilled? So how will you roll back the event? And all this complexities comes into picture, right? So that is where this transaction outbox pattern comes into picture. So as you could see clearly here, like you have this so you have this order service, like which parallelly what it does is like it kinds of updates its order in an order table, and it also has an outbox table, so where it gives information about the event that needs to be passed on. And once the order gets fulfilled, the status gets updated here, and here we have let's say here we will have an order service processor which will run periodically and which will check for this outbox table and create the messages. So this way we make sure that these, I mean, sending out an event and persisting this thing or loosely coupled, and also it is resilient, right? Like this is fail safe. Like you don't have to worry about rolling back the transactions and all that. Any questions here? Any thoughts? Or anything that Sandeep or Shiv you want to add here?
I'm good. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so one question that could come here is like, let's say from the order service, like why don't I update the order table and then commit the transaction and then create the message and all that, right? Like, but again, when you do that, like what you do is like you kind of add more responsibility to the order service to talk to the message queue, and if what if the queue is not available and all that, right? Like here, it's completely fails. Like you just fire a message, I mean, fire information to a table and then you forget about it, and you have taken that given the responsibility to a separate processor, which does that. Let's say even if the queue goes down at that point of time, like we don't have to worry. This processor, when it runs against whatever events that are not processed at that point of time, it will pick up from the route table and process it. Good. Was that very clear or like no questions? I was expecting some questions at least in this area. Hope everyone is with me. Are we good? Are we good to proceed? We'll just go. There's an hour or slightly more than that. Like, please hold on to it. Good. So this is about event sourcing. Moving on to the next one, that is CQRS. So command query and responsibility separation, right? Like, so this is a pattern where like we kind of separate the write logic and read logic. Okay, I think someone was not on mute. Could you please go on mute? We hear some background noise. Okay, so anyone have you used this pattern or anything that you want to share later to your experience? CQRS. Or any thoughts like why do you need something like this?
So like in our previous examples, we had like scenario update address, so kind of like it's command, whereas like querying like get product weight or something like that, it's kind of like a query.
Okay. Maybe like another example that I could relate to is right. Like let's take a social platform like LinkedIn. Okay. So what do you think about LinkedIn? Like how many write operations happens in versus read operations, right? Which is more, read or write? How many people read the others' posts and how many people create posts? When you compare these two things, right? Like so, which is more? Are they equal?
High level read could be more.
Yeah.
High level read could be more. And here the challenge that we have is like, let's say, so let's assume that, okay, I'm not sure about these numbers, but let's assume that like, okay, the read is 10 times more than the write. Okay. And how do you scale it now? So when you talk about scaling, right, like how will you be able to scale the read? Because here you're not, so the setup that you already have is like good for write. Like you don't have to worry about the write, but the scaling needs to happen mainly for the read. And if you have both these models together, like how will you scale your read separately in case of LinkedIn? So that is not possible, right? So that is where like we have this approach of CQRS where the read and write are segregated. So that these two concerns can be dealt with separately. If there is a scaling requirement, the scaling requirement for write can be different, the scaling requirement for read can be different, and they can be optimized accordingly. So even here, right? So this is another example related to what we have been doing, right? Like adding an item So here what happens is like, so we add an item to command, and if you see the point one, so we kind of store that event to an event source database, like what event exactly happened, and we also publish a message. And this message can be consumed by two different parties, right? The read side and the write side. And where we and these can be like two different applications altogether, and they can also have their own. For example, again in terms of read, where you have more frequent reads, like you can also maintain different databases. It's not necessary that like you have to maintain. This is again a trade-off, right? Like there is some duplication of data, but if to get a performance, like you can always do this. And as you can see here, like here it's the same item information for in case of order management, like so where in case of order, like you have to follow stricter rules and the transactions. So that is why like it goes into relational DB, and this is being maintained. And the same information goes to a NoSQL DB where you just want to query and read through it. And let's say you add something to cart and you just want to go back to your cart, or you want to see your order history and all that. These are query things, right? Like so this can be supplied by this particular setup. So if we have it this way, and let's say, let's assume that okay, like this is since we have separated these concerns, right? Let's say we have Thanksgiving and we're going to get more orders, and we want to specifically scale up specific areas accordingly. We can do it. Or it's a particular day where people are going to read more in social media on a particular site, and we can scale accordingly the read aspect of it. This is again another layer, right? Like where so the previous one we talked about was like we're just triggering events consumed by different applications. So here again, like we have a same service, but they have different stores using one event store and one read store, and where the data kind of get synced asynchronously, right? Like we have the data in the event store, and asynchronously this is being moved to a read store, which is being consumed by when you have queries. This is again the same application, but we are using different models. Any questions so far? Or anything anyone want to add?
Yeah, this I think is pretty similar to the example that I gave with the product thing before, right? Because it's a read model. We try to actually keep it the same, but that was creating a lot of complexity. So basically, we had to change the model that we have because we are just reading it and we are storing it and we are just using it, but we are not actually maintaining the data there. I think I can remember that example for this.
Thank you, thanks, Sarika. So this way, like what we achieve is like we can scale each size differently. Let's say like for the read, like we can scale them differently, and for the write, it can make sure that like it follows proper business rules and maintain data consistency. And however, it is important to understand that like just like any other thing we talked about, right? It's like microservices, like again in terms of EQRs, like this has its own complexities, and make sure that like use it like only when needed. Like so, one example that I gave you was this LinkedIn, right, where you already see that like the read operations are like much more than like people posting. I think that's it we had for the CQRs. Any other questions or anything to add before we move on? Okay, good then. So, okay, so event storming, right? So how many of you are familiar with this term? Or you're hearing it for the first time? Any thumbs up, hand raises? I'm just trying to see. Okay. I see few hands, like some of you are familiar with this, but not all. Okay. Okay. So this is is one of the techniques. This was, this is mainly used to identify. I think there was a question from Raja, right? Like identifying services. Was it Raja or something?
Yeah, Satish.
Yeah. So whenever we start an application, or like let's say like even when you are modernizing a project, right? Like we are taking a monolithic product and then moving it to a microservice. Like so, one of the main challenges that we have is like, so how do we identify the different blocks of the system, and how do you come up with the different services and bounded context? And this is one such technique which really helps you to achieve it. And this was coined by Alberto Brandolini, as I just mentioned here, and. And one of the main advantages of this is like, so it has its own process, like where it brings in all the stakeholders together, and we do a workshop. So we can also quickly, I'm not sure, okay, so we have everything here. Okay, it is just this slide. So what I could do is like, I have some sample which I could quickly walk you through, possibly what could happen in these sessions, so that you can have a better understanding. I'll quickly do this. Okay, so what we normally do, say the whole goal of this event storming exercise is like to understand your system better, and different services and the boundaries of the system, right? And when you start the session, like mostly like what will you need is mostly you'll need all the relevant people. So not only the tech people, so we'll need these people from the product side, the domain experts, and everyone, so that people could understand the existing system. And normally like stickies will be used, and I'll talk about this quickly, but there are different color stickies used for different operations. For example, right? Like, so normally people start, what will happen is like people will gather together in a room, and first thing that they will start doing is like, what are the domain events? A product being selected, or okay, this is very right. Okay, so what are the domain events? So together, right, as a group, all the technical people and product people. So what they will do is like, they will pick up this orange sticky, and then they will start placing the domain events on a board, and in any order. And the next thing that people will do is like, will try to, once you do this, so you will know like, okay, what are the important actions that happens within my product, and when these events will be ordered, like, okay, in which order this needs to happen. And this will be kind of a start of the exercise. And once this happens, like, then the next step will be like, so we have these events, but this would have been initiated by someone or some other system. So basically a command. So when a user would have given a search, or a user would have placed an order. And so this way, like, we also identify like what are the actors, like who are all the people involved here. And if it is triggered by any third-party systems, we will also cover what are the third-party systems who are involved here. And when placing, and also there is the next step of calling it a read model, right? So where we say, okay, so even for a particular action to happen, what are the information that people will need? Let's say, let's say a person goes and searches for a product, right? But based on what information, this person will select a product and place an order. Like, might be the features, right? When you let's say you buy a laptop, what you'll see is like, okay, what are the features that the laptop has, and what is the price of the laptop? And based on this, you will select multiple, and then you will do it. So that is where you will come with a read model. And so there are concepts like hotspots, like where you will figure out, okay, what are the challenges that we have. So let's say here one example that we have is like, when you do checkups, there are like too many promotions that are possible. That is really hard to manage for the team. And if there are some policies that needs to be defined, things like, okay, so here we have an example, say like, okay, you would have seen this in many occasions, right? Like when you order from your mobile, like you get additional discount, but that's not the case with your laptop, right? So this is again a policy that is being applied. So then people talk about, so all this happens in a group. All this happens as a group, like where we have like people from all areas, like tech, domain, product. And slowly we start also identifying external systems, like, okay, what are the external systems involved here? Let's say we have a payment gateway, which is an external system, and we have also a warehouse, like, because let's say once you place an order, you get the payment, you place an order, you also want to update the inventory saying that, okay, this one from in your warehouse, like one item got reduced. So this way, like, it will slowly get built up, and finally, like, we will come up with a picture. I mean, see, what I'm showing here is like a very simple representation, right? Like when you do it for an actual product, like, this will be really huge. Like you'll have a huge wall, like where you'll have hundreds of stickies stick together, and then we'll do it. But here, for simplicity, I'm just carving out just few cards in the whole process. And once you do this, like then we'll start identifying, okay, what are the areas that these events and the actions are being captured, and then start identifying bounded context. And from here, like we can identify, like, okay, what are the services that we could develop. This is just a quick walkthrough of like what happens in event storming, and any questions so far? I know that it was pretty quick and this is really a huge topic to cover, but I still thought like I'll walk you through this so that you'll, with an example, you'll be able to understand. Any questions? Raja, like, did I answer your question?
In generic, I understood this concept. I also read it more, but I had that specific query about a specific use case. So I'll maybe we can actually talk it offline.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, we can talk about it and take it offline. Sure.
Yeah, I think just to add to Raja's question, right? One thing you can look at is do this event storming exercise, right, and try to find the boundaries, like bounded context, and that could hint you towards what are your microservices basically, or whether you are doing it correctly. And that this exercise is happening with your domain experts, right? So there are good chances that the boundaries would be correct. And
yeah, I mean, so that is more important in this whole exercise, right? Like you have to make sure that like you have the relevant people. Otherwise, like this is not going to be effective. So that is where the whole challenge is, like bringing everyone together.
Right. I definitely actually follow this one, Sandeep. But as I was mentioning that I had very specific use case, I don't want to deviate the discussion. Sure.
Yeah.
Right. I'd like to talk it offline if given a chance.
Sure, Raja. You have our LinkedIn handles also. Like if you have any questions, like feel free to reach out to us, and in event storming, definitely I can help you.
Hey, Satish, I'm just taking the liberty, okay? Don't mistake me.
Sure.
Satish is in the process of writing a blog on event storming as such. So keep an eye on Satish's blog post. So he's planning a series of blogs, right? So I just wanted to call that out because he's putting a lot of effort in the background.
I mean, this is just a draft of the blog. I just started writing it. So, I mean, I saw just one slide and, this one page. Right? Since I had this, I thought like I'll just walk people through so that it will be easy for them to relate.
Yeah. I'm just calling it out because people should know that you are actually working in the background and you are trying to bring up a series of blogs. So, folks, do watch out, Satish, in this page.
Thanks, Srihari. Thanks for the call out. And also here, right? I mean, I think we could also quickly. Yeah, so this is something I was going to call out. So this is based on the event storming exercise that we did, right? Like this is with one of our clients. Like this was our state actually. I hope this is visible, or we have to make it even bigger. So this was our state. Like I mean, what we did was like we were in a modernization project, and we had a huge monolith which was built for like a couple of decades, and we started. Creating them into microservice, and once we started doing this, like we started creating so many services, like, and at a point we saw that okay, there are like 12 to 15 services, and which are maintaining 12 to 15 teams, and it really went unmanageable, right? And that is when we realized okay, we have to stop, take a pass, and then see like what could be done. And we did this event storming exercise with a few of the experts in this area from ThoughtWorks, and with that help, like we were able to achieve what we saw on the right side, right? Like we were able to bring down different services and then bring them under a business, bounded context, and reduce and kind of reduce the number of services which are not needed. And here, this is almost like a context map, right? Like how these bounded contexts are there, and decided like how the communication happens between the services within a bounded context and how it happens from one bounded context to other. We were able to derive all this, and so this is just a visualization of like where we were and where we what is the state that we achieved with the help of event storming. And this is definitely one of the powerful exercises that, yeah. Please follow this thread, and yeah, I mean, as Thierry mentioned, I will also, I mean, once I have my blog ready, I'll post it in LinkedIn as well, so you could follow the series. Anything anyone want to add related to event storming before? Before we conclude, okay. Yeah, I think that's it from me. Before handing it over to Sandeep, right? Like these are some of the topics that we covered today. So we started with bounded context. We talked about how it is useful to break down the system into smaller chunks, and we moved on to ubiquitous language, where we have a single, unified language, and which is being discussed right from the domain experts till the code. Not only people talking it, also the code talks about it. And then we moved on to context maps, where we saw how the bounded context communicate with each other, where we get a high level view of it. And then we moved on to modular monoliths, where we say instead of just starting a microservice, like start, maybe if you don't have an answer, start with a modular monolith, but make sure that a modular monolith is completely modular and it doesn't interact with other modules except for the controllers or the endpoints. And then we talked about event sourcing. We saw examples of Amazon giving you references of what people are searching based on the product you are searching. And we talked about this payroll example, where you can even go back history and update a particular state. Then we moved on to CQRS. We saw the LinkedIn example and how the read and write has been performed, and how these can be optimized separately. And finally, we saw this event storming exercise, where which helps us to identify the bounded context and the services. So this is a quick recap of like what we did, and with this, I'll hand over the session back to Sandeep. Thank you.
Cool, thanks. Nice. Good luck on the event storming blog series. That would be helpful. Cool. So we were almost nearing the end of the session. I'll just cover one more topic. So there is a parallel technique to event storming, which is called domain storytelling. So that's the website. And it's a similar audience, right? Domain experts. You have everyone from business analysts, technologists. They're all coming together. And the idea is similar thing. You're getting list of initial bounded context and initial domain model. Again, this is all a reference in a book, so you can look at it. I think this font may not be too visible, but idea here is this doesn't use domain event, but this rather like you are writing a story. Someone is telling you a story what happens in their domain as a domain expert, and then you are noting it down in a picture form, like a customer. There is a product, and they add a product to a cart, right? And then basically system creates an order, something like that, when cart gets checked out. So what you do is basically whatever we're seeing on the last slide, other way. Yeah, so whatever we're doing with event storming, it's a similar exercise, but except domain event, you're still trying to look at how process looks like. And once you have an entire picture drawn, then you are trying to find out what are the bounded contexts, right? What are the areas when one domain expert stop talking and another one start talking? That's a pivot, right? Because someone will say, okay, after order is created, that other team looks at a payment, and then you know that there is this other team, and then there's a pivot there, and maybe that's a potential or natural bounded context. Because the payment team would then take over the order and accept the payment and all that. So do take a look at. They have this tool called as Agon.io, and you can on your existing domain you can do both of this exercise, right? Like if you take some of the BAs in a room and some developers, and get in a room and try to talk about your system, right? Important things in your system. And try to put stickies with event storming, as well as try to do same exercise with domain storytelling, and find a bounded context and see which one you like, right? You can compare the advantages and disadvantages of both techniques. I think the thing with domain storytelling is you do not have domain events here. So if you are designing event-driven architecture, then this may not be very helpful. So if you are doing with event-driven architecture, maybe doing event storming would make more sense. But both of them are interesting, so do try. I'm not going to cover the data mesh topic. I think the book has some references to it. So just keeping watch of a time, we are going to stop here. What we want to do quickly in next 5 minutes before we continue and sending you links for the book is we like to get some feedback from you. So here is a feedback form.